Okay. You ready? Let's do this. You're listening to Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. This is the podcast that delves deep into the outdoors, will inspire, inform, and get you stoked to explore. And I'm your host, David Webb. Welcome to episode 46 of Explorer's Podcast. I'm your host, David Webb. Today, we're continuing our series of getting behind the scenes with Explorer Magazine's contributors, photographers, illustrators, and everyone else who makes our brand what it is. My guest is Andrew Findlay. When I first took over as editor in 2012, Andrew was one of the first calls I made. At the time, author J.B. McKinnon was just closing out his column after a number of years, and I needed someone to replace his introspective, cerebral style of writing. Andrew was a perfect fit. So since spring of 2013, he's been writing the column Wild Side, as well as a number of features, one of which we'll get into today. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy the chat with freelance journalist Andrew Findlay. All right, Andrew Findlay, welcome to Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, for the winter we're having, it's hard for a kind of winter soul like me, but sunny and things are looking up, maybe with a bit of snow in the forecast. So it's a good thing.
Yes. It's been rough on the coast. I'm driving out to Big White in a couple days to try to get some decent turns out there. But yeah, for a skier such as myself, it hasn't been the best winter. So your name is Andrew Findlay. What else? Where do you live and what do you do?
Well, I'm from Kamloops originally. I'm a BC boy, born and raised. But I've been living on Vancouver Island for about 25 years in the Comox Valley with my wife and two daughters. I've been working here as a freelance journalist based from home here for as long as that and a bit more.
How long do you think we've known each other?
Man, yeah, it's been a long time.
It has.
There is a precursor to your work there at Explorer.
Adventurous Magazine. It was Adventurous Magazine. Do you remember that? I was the editor of a fledgling startup that lasted about a year, and you wrote for that. And I think you might have done a little bit of work maybe for BC Outdoors when I first started at that magazine. Anyway, we've worked together for a long time, on and off, for sure. Very long time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's cool because people definitely come and go in this industry. So yeah, it is a long time.
Mm-hmm. So you are a freelance journalist. Why?
Yeah, well, that's a question I'm going to answer for some high school students tomorrow when I talk to them. But I always enjoyed writing. When I was in high school, I didn't, a lot of kids hated writing essays and doing research. So that I enjoyed that process, and I sort of carried on with that in university. Wasn't really thinking about writing for a career, but I volunteered for the university newspaper at SFU and just felt like it compelled to write. I don't know how else to put it, but I needed a catalyst to sort of get me going in that direction. So I did go to journalism school after university, and that kind of got me into community newspapers briefly, the goal of going freelance. And then I took the leap of faith 2 years after working at a community newspaper and have been riding that roller coaster ever since.
So what's the height, the peak of the roller coaster, the best thing? And what's the low point in the roller coaster for being a freelance journalist?
Well, I'm so used to the perpetual job insecurity of being a freelance writer. Mm-hmm. I don't get stressed out about that as long as I have, I always have projects on the go. Mm-hmm. And, there are times, obviously I would say, the COVID-19 pandemic
mm-hmm.
was a little bit of an existential crisis because I had, numerous travel adventure projects lined up that just kind of evaporated overnight. And, you schedule your upcoming, 6 months or year to these assignments and travel, and, they vanished and there was nothing else filling that void. So there was some months of, wondering what's the future of this business going to look like. Mm-hmm. But, I kind of, it didn't last as long as I thought. I just rolled back into work and
mm-hmm.
There were some casualties in the media business for sure from that.
Mm-hmm.
And not
mm-hmm.
just because of COVID, of course, like media's changed, with the digital revolution and stuff like that. But, I would say that was a little bit of a low point, but really for me, it's just a bunch of different high points. I get to explore places that I wanted, I'm interested in. I get to dive into topics that fascinate me. And it rarely feels like drudgery. I mean, sometimes you have writer's block and you struggle to find the narrative through a piece, but I enjoy that process. It's part of it. So I don't complain.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. I think that you've, managed to build that into your professional life, it's not quite so jarring. But so
Yeah.
you get to dive into storylines that you're interested in, that fascinate you. So what are you diving into? What's fascinating you these days?
Well, I've been writing a lot these days about, I'll say under the umbrella of climate change, but how it's impacting mountain travel, which we may talk about, regarding the latest column that I wrote for you guys at Explore. But also, I like wildlife and ecology stories because they bring together a whole bunch of elements, like how is a changing climate affecting the systems that we depend on the planet, and wildlife and native plants and trees and stuff like that depend on, and also how we're living on the planet and how we're impacting or accelerating the change that's happening. And I always find those really interesting stories. I've done a few pieces recently on sort of climate change in the mountains, in particular how they're impacting rivers that feed the dry prairies and the millions of people that depend on those waters. Really interesting topic. Right now, it's just changing the way people have to think about water and the assumptions that people have had about, it'll snow X amount in the mountains and that will melt and it'll feed the rivers and we can use the X amount of water downstream. A lot of those assumptions are changing, and it's interesting times. The
column that Andrew just mentioned to our listeners as in the winter edition of Explore magazine's all about how we're facing really the era seeing climate change actually affect our outdoor experience and our travel in the mountains, rather than maybe even a decade or two ago thinking of it in a theoretical stance, like what's it going to look like? Well, now we're seeing it, and it's very powerful. Can be grim, but it's real and interesting. And I always appreciate your outlook on that. But that's not all you write about. So in the fall edition of Explorer, you wrote a very fascinating feature called Beyond the Drop. So what was that about?
I heard about this study that the UBC neurologist I interviewed for that story, it made a bit of a splash in the media, and when he released it, and I read it, and I thought, man, like I've been involved in mountain biking for years, and I know, if not directly, know people who know someone who has had a life-changing injury from mountain biking.
As do I, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, most people do who are involved in the sport. And it's always been this thing that's there, but no one had really quantified it. And it's talking to that UBC doctor and researcher, I mean, it was an easy thing to do. The numbers are all there, but no one had done it. And I'd been aware of it and these catastrophic injuries. And it was just the side of the sport that was like, man, that's just, it's an adventure sport, and it has inherent risk like a lot of the sports we do, but it just seemed like no one was talking about it. So that was interesting to me.
To open up that conversation to say, hey, mountain biking, we love it. We love doing it. It's such a big part of the economic development of communities and towns all around BC, particularly, but across the country, really, mountain bike tourism, Sault Ste. Marie, throughout Manitoba even. And it's this great thing that's only been picking up steam. And there's this little thing about it that there is for lack of a better term, epidemic of spinal cord injuries related to this sport. That I was reading your draft when you sent it. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe the numbers. I think it was like, there are more spinal cord injuries in BC every year from mountain biking than all of football in the United States of America. Like, I mean, it's crazy. And then so much has been talked about football in the United States of America and the safety and things about it, to think that this hasn't even really hit the general discourse.
No, it was interesting to me. And I think what I found surprising, one of the guys I interviewed who did suffer a spinal cord injury, now he teaches adaptive cycling. Really interesting guy. Like, he was very open and about his journey and the devastation, personal sort of devastation at first, and how he emerged out of that. But he was also like, when I told him about the study and the numbers, he was like, oh yeah, like I kind of thought it would be more than that, like the numbers.
Wow.
So there is this sense of acceptance out there that, and I get that, like you hop on a bike and you ride downhill, and if you crash on hard ground, like it can have, it hurts. At least it's going to hurt. And I was also surprised, to be honest, when I reached out to the Whistler Bike Park, just how uninterested they were in the numbers.
Yeah, well, you drew a mention of that in the article, that talking to the executives at Whistler, they just didn't really want to talk about it. But you talked to some trail builders, and again, I think one of them mentioned that his son had two friends who were suffering from pretty severe spinal cord injuries.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. But there is a sense of acceptance in the community for sure that it just, it's happening. Okay. But, there's got to be something we can do about it, or at least, I think at least talking about it more, because maybe there are some people that don't realize just talking about it, getting the information and the discussion about it, I think is so important.
I guess the question is, like, I'm not entirely clear, like what you actually do about it. I mean, there's obviously education, there's an education piece, at places where people, pay for a lift ticket. And I know that Brian Kwan, the guy who did the study, he was expecting to have a bit more interaction with the Whistler bike park, just, and he wasn't pointing fingers, like, and he's, as I said in the story, he's not a mountain biker and he's not trying to shut the sport down, far from it. He was just like,
no,
here's the
numbers. Didn't get that impression at all. He just said, listen, this is the data that I have. I'm going to share it, Yeah.
And what can we do about it? I think it should be looked at carefully, and what, if anything, can we do to mitigate that? Because it's not only personally devastating, it's a financial hit on the medical system. I mean, as he documents, to me, it was interesting in so many levels, just because I'm so involved in that sport and have been for so long.
Yeah. Super fascinating. It starts with education and discussion. So I was really excited about that topic. And I thought the article came out really well with a lot of photography from Brian Creary, who is another one of our contributors, very, very involved in that industry and that sport out in the BC Kootenay Rocky region. So you've been writing an Explore column regularly since I first took over as editor back in 2013. I think you'd written for Explore before that even. But what's your next column about, without giving away too much, of course?
Well, I was thinking about that today. I've done a few trips. I did a winter trip and a summer trip to Poland recently. And I've always, for some reason, I've been fascinated by that country and the mountain culture that they have, and the tradition of sort of excelling in, everything from Himalayan alpinism, back in the 80s with that vanguard of Polish climbers, the freedom climbers, they call them sort of euphemistically, and also like today, one of the top ski mountaineers in the world is from Poland, the first guy to climb and ski K2 and both Everest and K2 without oxygen, and just like unbelievable feats of athleticism and fitness. But I guess I was curious, this country that basically does not have mountain. They have a fringe of mountains along the southern border. So I'm thinking of doing a column that sort of takes some of the things I gleaned about the Polish character and the history there and the kind of hardness of the people that maybe breed success in sort of extreme mountain sports.
Yeah, super interesting. So what else are you doing in 2026? Do you have any trips? You mentioned that you do a lot of adventure travel projects. What are your stories? Something personal? What's going on for you this year?
I'm going to Austria in March to do a ski traverse, the Silvretta ski traverse, for a story with Steve Ogle, who
Steve's done a lot of photography for Explore over the year.
Yeah. So we've got a trip, an assignment there. And then I'm going with my family, we're going to Morocco for spring break. This is pure family
really
getaway.
Nice.
So looking forward to that. And that's sort of what's on the near horizon.
And speaking to a high school tomorrow, which is fun too, right?
Yeah. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, it's Humanities Week, they call it at the high school that both my kids go to, and they're bringing in people that are involved in in the creative space somehow, filmmakers, novel writers. So nice. I'll be talking to them.
Well, I'm sure your daughters will be proud. What's the message you're going to leave the high schoolers with about the future of journalism?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that because they're living in a world where they use ChatGPT all the time to research. My kids use it as a tool, and they're probably going to be baffled that I can make a living as a writer in this world of emerging artificial intelligence. And so what would I say? I would tell them that the way I learned journalism when I studied at Langara College back in the mid 90s, it's completely different than the world today. Like that was when newspapers were laid out on page, whatever you remember that. And, newspapers were still relatively vibrant. I freelanced for the Vancouver Sun, believe it or not, like, cause they had this huge weekend section.
Oh yeah, of course. A Sunday edition. Yeah.
It was a great, few years. And that was, I kind of got into it just as newspapers were about to feel the crunch. And then it's just been catastrophic decline in newspaper journalism, unfortunately. But, I would tell them that there's still a lot of people who believe in authentic storytelling and real people writing real stories. And there's I think there's a bigger need than there ever has been in this world right now that can seem so messed up and so full of bullshit and half truths and lies that journalism is a worthwhile pursuit in whatever form it takes. There's still people starting new magazines. There's online philanthropic funded, online publications, and I would say it's rewarding, super challenging to navigate for sure. Because it's volatile and dynamic and changing all the time. I would tell them that I weathered as a journalist, as you have, being around for 2.5 decades doing it. I remember sending my first story as a freelance writer from Kathmandu in an internet cafe, a thing that does not exist anymore. Before everyone had a tablet and they would probably, the students would probably be like, what is an internet cafe?
Yeah, that would be the first question. It's like, oh, they were everywhere. That's where all the backpackers gathered, right?
Yeah.
Internet cafe.
Yeah, it blows me away to think about how much media has changed in kind of a short period of time when you really think about it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even this medium we're on right now, when we started out, it didn't exist. But yeah, Andrew, I really appreciate you joining me on this call today. Do you have a website or social media you'd like people to know about?
Talk about a dinosaur. But
I know you're not a big social guy. I knew that asking, but just in case you wanted to promote it.
I do. I have it at Findlay Journalist, and I'm, my Facebook site is kind of my de facto website. It's Andrew Findlay Journalism.
Nice.
But I'm not gathering followers. Quickly, just be, I don't know.
Not changing careers to an influencer is what you're saying. I think you wrote about that once for Explorer, actually, the difference between the big eyes influencer and the small eye influencer. Yeah.
But it's part of what I do. It's a small, I do it because I think I should to promote my work. But yeah, I'm out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad you are, and we're glad you're writing for Explorer. So thanks a lot, Andrew, for joining me today. And I'll talk to you soon. And everyone listening, keep reading Explorer and you'll see Andrew's name in it.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
So during the intro, I didn't really get into how long I've known Andrew for. But what's funny is, during the 20-year working history that we have, we've probably only stood in the same room about 2 or 3 times, if that. So it was great to connect on a call. I really enjoy his style of writing and how he approaches his topics, and I hope you do too, because he's been a staple of Explorer magazine for over a decade and will continue to be for the future to come. As long as he's willing, anyway. Thanks for joining me today. I'm David Webb, and hey, live the adventure.